Hey guys, I'm going to show you how I install Fedora Linux and why I think it's pretty easy to use and easy to customize, and there's really not too much terminal work. So I'm going to show you how I do that. The first thing I did was I copied the ISO to my thumb drive, and I use a program called Ventoy that allows me to have multiple installers on one USB drive, including Windows 11, Windows 10, and various Linux distributions. I do that instead of having one USB drive for everything. I'd rather it all be there in one place. So I'm going to go ahead and use Fedora Workstation Live, the 36 beta. The final release is not out yet. And I'm not going to bother testing it. Let's just start it. I do have a 2K monitor, and my capture card only can do 1080p, so I will have to adjust the resolution after it starts. I'm probably going to edit out any artifacts, but if you see any, it's just the capture card and not actually my display. So yeah, this right here, my screen doesn't actually look like that. Okay, I am at the initial installer. I'm going to go ahead and install it to my hard drive. It warns me that it's a pre-release. English. This is unstable pre-release software. I want to proceed. If I see any bugs, I'll let you know if I've seen it before or if I think it's something unique to Fedora 36 beta. So for my installation selection, I am going to choose, I have two 1 terabyte NVMe drives. I think I'm going to choose this one, but let's take a look at the full disk summary. Oops. I want to make my storage automatic, and I'd like to make additional space available. I usually have two NVMe drives, one for Windows and one for Linux. And I'm actually not completely sure which one I have each right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'd like to make more space available. Click Done, and it will allow me to change it up. Now, I already have Fedora 36 on this drive, spoiler alert, but I wanted to show how easy it was to install. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the partitions that are already there. Delete, delete, and I'm going to leave the boot partition because unfortunately Windows installed its bootloader into my Linux drive, and the Windows installer doesn't give me that choice. So I'm going to reclaim 953 gigabytes, reclaim that space, and that's where it'll install my Linux. So let's begin install. I'm using a rather slow thumb drive, so this may not be the best representation of how fast the installer goes. All right, the installation's finished. Click Finish Installation. And now we can reboot it. Yes, let's restart. Because I have multiple operating systems installed, I will have to go into my BIOS and tweak some things to make sure I boot the right software. Priorities. Oh, I am set to that, but let's make Windows my next. And I can ignore that because I've already got it up here. Save changes and reset. Done. All right, here is my Grub bootloader menu. I can boot into Fedora. I can load into a rescue session, which just loads fewer drivers in an attempt to get past maybe a boot crash or something like that. Then I have my Windows Boot Manager, which is just boot into Windows. And then I have my firmware settings, which you just saw a minute ago. So I'm going to go ahead and boot into Fedora. And again, these screen glitches are on the fault of the HDMI capture card. That's not actually what I'm seeing on my screen. I'll fix that. Oh, looks like I can't do that during the initial setup, so I will take a video of it with my phone. All right, so this is what I see on my initial setup. Going to click Start Setup. I'm fine with location services. I am fine with automatic problem reporting. I definitely want to enable third-party repositories. That includes things like Chrome and Steam. I'm going to skip my account making for now and put in my name. I'm not going to put my full name this time because I'm recording it for a video, so. And a password. This is not the strongest password, but it's my desktop, and if they get onto it physically, I've got bigger problems, so. All done, start using it. And let's change it to the right resolution. Okay, so now I have it back at 1920 by 1080, 60 hertz. When you initially open it, it offers to give you a tour of the desktop. The super key, otherwise known as the Windows key, is what you use for the overview. Then there's just type to search. The thing I like about the overview menu in GNOME is the start button serves both as an overview to see all your windows, and it acts similar to the Spotlight search on a Mac, where you can just type what it is that you want. So I can type Firefox and I can get Firefox. If I want a terminal, I can type terminal, so on and so forth. I do have workspaces. That means basically extra places to store windows, so I can have them on different displays, and it creates additional ones as you need them. So if you don't use them, there will only ever be 2. I do not have a touchpad, but there's a 3-finger gesture that does the same thing as what the super key does. Same for the swiping workspaces. But Win plus left and right does... Oh, no, it's Win Shift? Oh, what is it? There's a keyboard command for it, but I don't recall it off the top of my head. That's it. Have a nice day. Cool. So this is me initially setting up Fedora. So let's go into the software. There's a ton of updates because this is beta, which means they are adding new packages and fixing things daily. So there will be updates pretty much every day all the way up till the release. I'll go ahead and download those and get those installed. All right, it's got them all downloaded. Fedora doesn't like to install the updates while the system is running. Instead, it prefers to do it on a reboot. I think that's smarter and more stable. And I'm going to go ahead and click Restart and Update. This system will automatically restart and install your updates in 60 seconds. Now, just do it now. All right, we're going to boot into Fedora. If I don't select an option, it will eventually just go with Fedora. And as you can see here, it shows you that it's installing updates. Do not turn off your computer. Again, sorry for having to use my cell phone. I really should just get either a better capture card or a different monitor, but yeah. All right, it's rebooting again now that it's installed my updates. Here's my grub boot menu. And if I don't press anything, it will just launch into Fedora. Sorry, my login screen is at the full native resolution. Yikes. Go ahead and log in here. All right, so let's get to customizing. Got a whole bunch of updates installed. And that's done. Let's open Firefox and get logged into that. And I always use an authenticator. I strongly recommend it. All right. That's connected. And it's going to start installing my favorite extensions. The one extension that's important if you're using GNOME is called GNOME Shell Integration. This allows you to install extensions for GNOME to customize the desktop. So I already have that as part of my account, but if you don't, you can grab it from the Firefox browser add-ons page. Then we're going to look at GNOME Shell extensions. And I'm going to show you some of my favorite ones. Let's see, let's just go straight down the list here. So there is the Sound Input Output Device Chooser. Normally in GNOME, if you wanted to change how your sound devices worked, you would have to go into Settings, then Sound, and then choose where you want your audio input and output devices to be. I find that kind of tedious. There is a extension that makes that much easier. And I'm going to go into the settings for that extension. And I'm going to turn off profiles because I always use stereo. I don't need any of the other fancy stuff. And that's all I need for now. So now I can choose where I want my audio to come from just via the bar on the top right. Another one is App Indicator support. GNOME Shell does not have a system tray, but if you want it to, you can install this extension and things like your Discord and Steam that have tray icons will show up in the top right. There's one other extension I want called Hot Edge. So it used to be your favorite applications lived on the left side of the screen, but that changed in GNOME 40. What didn't change was the hot corner, which has you going to the top left. But since I have to go to the very top, then to the bottom to get to my apps, that seems a little bit silly. So I have a extension I like to use called Hot Edge. I'm going to install that. And voila, now when I touch the bottom of the screen, I get access to the activities view. So let's go ahead and get a few other things installed. One is called RPM Fusion. This basically is a bunch of proprietary software that Fedora does not want to include in its repositories for various legal or whatever reasons. It's actually pretty easy to get these repositories added. What this does is it just extends the amount of software you have access to. And I can just open this. This is the free software. And that's free as in freedom. And then the non-free software, again, non-free as in freedom. Install those. These are things that are, for example, patent encumbered, where you're not legally allowed to distribute it with Fedora, but you can download and install it separately. And there's a few things you can do here to update everything all at once. There's some command line utilities that are much faster than just running updates. So if I want to install all of the video codecs that are non-free, I can do that from the terminal. And all I have to do is copy and paste these lines here. It's going to ask me for my password. And it's going to go fetch them. It's going to ask me if I want to install. I'm going to click yes. This will install things like H.264, 265, video codecs, things like that. Since this is my first time installing packages from here, it's going to make sure I agree with the encryption key that they use, which is yes. All right, that's done, and there's one other. The following command will install the sound and video complement packages needed by some applications. Paste that in and run. Yes, that's fine. Done. There's one other application that I like to use, and that is libdvd CSS. That is illegal in some countries, including the US, even though I'm in the US. This allows me to copy DVDs to my computer, and I can put them on my Plex. So I'm going to install that as well. Yep, go for it. And there's one other thing. If you happen to have a wireless card that uses Broadcom drivers, there is some firmware that they cannot be distributed with Fedora. So Fedora has the wireless drivers, but it doesn't have the firmware for certain Broadcom wireless Wi-Fi devices. You can get those from here if that applies to you. It doesn't apply to me. The vast majority of Wi-Fi devices work out of the box in Linux, but Broadcom, they make things more complicated than it needs to be. So if you have Broadcom drivers, you could take care of it down here and get the extra firmware you need. All right, so that is done. So now I have all my codecs done. There's one last thing I like to do, and that is use FlatHub to get access to a greater selection of packages. Go to Quick Setup, click Fedora, and just download and install the FlatHub repository file. Click it, open it, and install. Voila! So far, the only thing I've used the terminal for is installing extra video codecs and audio codecs. Now that that's done, let's check for updates. This could take a while. All right. Now we can install a bunch of different applications. For example, if we want a BitTorrent client, we can just install that right there. I don't have to wait for it to finish before browsing other stuff. And in most, not all, but in most Linux applications, in GNOME specifically, you can just start typing what you want and it will bring up a search for you. So I'm going to go ahead and type the word Steam. And you see it just brings up that search and I can install it right here. Or if I have another computer that I want to stream games from, I can do Steam Link. It has both options. And if there's more than one place you can get something from, this is the one from RPM Fusion, but I also have a copy of Steam on FlatHub. You can get it from either location. I'm just going to get it from RPM Fusion. While I'm waiting on that, let's go ahead and install, Kdenlive. I'm going to have to edit this video later, and this is what I'm going to use to do it. Let's install that. Let's grab Minecraft. Oh, I thought it was part of FlatHub. Yeah, it is. Huh. I'm not going to install that yet. I am going to, as soon as this is done installing, I'm going to reboot and make sure that that appears. I feel like the application list isn't fully synchronized. Okay, now that that's installed, I'm going to reboot again. Now that I'm back at the desktop, let's try this again. Minecraft. There we go. That's much better. Huh. So I guess that's the first issue I've found so far doing a fresh install, is if you add FlatHub, the list of applications doesn't seem to fully populate until you reboot. So, okay, that's one issue I've found so far. Something tells me that that's not Fedora 36 specific, but I don't know for sure. So now that I have some apps installed, let's go, we can add some to our favorites. And let's go ahead and see how easy it is to get Steam going. All right, now let me log in. I'm going to not reveal my login, so. Okay, now that I am logged into my Steam account, I'm going to change a few things. The first thing I want to do is get all my Windows applications available to me to run in Linux. All the ones that can, anyways. I'm going to go to Steam Play, enable Steam Play for all other titles. And then I'm going to go to a couple of other places. One, I'm going to go to Interface and notify me about additions or changes to my game's new releases and upcoming releases. I find that a nuisance. I'm going to turn that off. And then in-game, I like to have the in-game FPS counter, but that's up to you. And I'm going to click OK. Steam will need to restart. That's no big deal. And we now have Steam with all of our Windows games available. So let's go ahead and install, let's do Deep Rock Galactic. That sounds good. That's 2.5 gigs. That won't be too large of a download. I don't need to see that page again. And I'll let this download. It's done. Let's see how easy it is to play a game. We'll do DirectX 12. Not that it should matter, it's going to get translated into Vulkan. Seems kind of wrong installing the Microsoft VC redistributable package on Linux, but it works. This also does some Vulkan shader pre-processing. This helps improve the smoothness of the graphics while you play. I could skip this, but it will actually save me performance to let this finish. Also, on another note, this is the same kind of processing that helped Elden Ring perform so well on the Steam Deck. Also, this is a one-time thing. You don't have to see this every time you launch. It's just the very first time. And there you go.
I'm not really feeling too well today, but who cares?
And just like that, I am in game. With generally excellent performance. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. And I can do that with Alt F4. So now that I showed how easy it is to get Steam set up, I think the next thing I want to do is show you some customizations I do to make it a little bit nicer to use. We'll look at some more extensions. One of the first ones I like to do is dark and light theme switcher. Oh, that one had an error. Let's not do that one. There's a different one that I used. Was it this one? It may have been this one. Let's go ahead and look at its configuration. And we'll turn on the on-demand. So what I can do is have this transition to light mode and dark mode on a scheduled time or whenever I really want to. Right now it's going to do it at sunrise and sunset, but I can override it. So right now it is in light mode, but I can just override it with the click, and now it's in dark mode. And that also changes the wallpaper, which I think is pretty fancy. So let's try a different background. The ones that have the split screen are the ones that have different backgrounds for light and dark mode, which looks like it's nearly all of the ones I have installed. So that's pretty cool. So now that I have that easy switcher between light and dark mode, let's grab a few other fun utilities. There's another one called Blur My Shell. This makes the top panel translucent, and it also changes the gray background from the activities view to a blurred version of your wallpaper, which I think makes it look a lot nicer. But that's just my opinion. Another one I like to use is rounded corners. However, I have to tweak this one because the blurred panel makes it look a little weird. So, oh, I have to reopen the page to make the settings appear, which is a nuisance. So I am going to get rid of the panel corners, so there's nothing right here. And now I just have rounded corners in the very top and very bottom corners of both sides of my screen. And I don't know if it really picks up that well on the capture card, but it's a nice touch. And another one I like to do is, what is it called? It's definitely some fancy bling. Ah, yes, Compiz Windows effect. This one is a really fun one. Turn this on, and now Windows have a wobbly effect. If you see any tearing, that is part of the window capture. That is not what I'm seeing on my actual monitor. I'm gonna turn that one back off. And let's look at some other tweaks. There is some things that people don't like about GNOME. One of them is the minimize and maximize button are gone. The maximize button is kind of redundant. Anywhere on the top bar you can drag. By the way, even if there's a button, the drag overrides it, so don't worry about that. But if you just drag to the top, it's maximized. And if you drag from the top back down, even if it's on the status bar, as long as it's not here at the date where it shows the calendar and notifications, you can drag down and it's no longer maximized. So the maximize button is kind of a waste of space in this scenario. So they removed it. Minimize, the GNOME team feels that the minimize button is bad UI because if you minimize a window and have multiple desktops, it's hard to remember where all of your active windows are. So if you have a bunch minimized, should they be minimized on only one desktop? Should they be minimized for all desktops? You know, if you do have a bunch of windows that are both in different desktops and minimized, it can get confusing as to where everything is. So they decided that if there's a window that you want to stay open and not close, it would make more sense to put it on a different window or on a different desktop rather than it would be to minimize. And so they decided that there doesn't need to be a minimize button. A lot of people disagree with this, and that's actually easy to add back in. There's a utility called GNOME Tweak Tool, and I'll install that. And let's tweak a few things. Window title bars. Wait, let's get our maximize window icon back and the minimize one as well. And now we can minimize. Or bring it back by going to the bar at the bottom. I'm can also change our fonts, how our fonts are hinted and aliased. You can change keyboard commands. In Linux, middle click is used for paste, in addition to some other features like closing tabs and stuff like that. They generally don't interfere with each other, but if you don't like middle click paste, you can turn it off here. And if you want your clock to show seconds, you can do that. Or if you want it to show the weekday, so it's Sunday, April 10th. You can also show week numbers if you really want to. Another tweak I like to do, I notice my clock is in what I like to call military time. Let's change that and put it back in 24-hour time. All right, so there you go. This is pretty much how I set up my machine. I hardly use the terminal for anything. Obviously, I still have to clean up my extensions and tweak a few other things and log into all my services, but I don't find the installation and setup of Linux particularly hard for desktop use, especially if you use Fedora and especially if you don't use an NVIDIA graphics card. If you do use an NVIDIA graphics card, you can get the latest drivers in the RPM Fusion repo, and some copying and pasting in commands will get those up and running. So it can be an extra source of nuisance to get the NVIDIA drivers going if you're doing that with Fedora. But if you don't have an NVIDIA card using Radeon like I have, there is no setup. It just works out of the box. And there's really not too much effort into it. So hopefully this video explains why I think Linux is pretty easy to set up and use. Give me some comments. Let me know what you think. If there's something I missed, let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate your patience with this. Thank you. Bye.